The advanced reporting tool really brings the power of all the data within Palmate, which is really neat, rather than trying to, figure out certain screens and what to change and what not to change. There's a lot of data already housed within your own database that can prove to be helpful to make some decisions. So it would be nice if you could actually pull reports and things like that off of the data. So that's why this tool is pretty beneficial. So let me just go ahead and just get right into it on kind of what you do. My plan is just to kind of go through it at a, I'll try to do the best I can to leave open spaces for questions, but my thought is if I could just kind of go through it, and then at the end we could have questions and go from there. So let me go ahead and do that. So with the advanced reporting tool, the first thing you'll see differently is under admin, there's a report admin. Actually, this report admin is part of everybody's Palmate. So, and it's broken up into 3 categories. You'll have the system category, which are all the system level reports. These are all reports that currently exist within Palmate that you can launch. Your driver log, the inventory tag report, load sheet, things like that, which you can already launch within Palmate. But what this provides you is the ability to go ahead and copy existing reports and edit their template. And I'll use that word quite a bit in this discussion. The template is what you're already familiar with when you edit like a BOL. Currently, you can already edit a few reports. But with version 3.4, all of the reports are editable so that you can pop into a template, and I'll get into that template editor in a minute. So you can edit the templates for all of these existing system level reports. Options, what this is there's a handful of reports in Palmate, not a ton, but just a handful, that if they have on the left-hand side a whole list of settings that you can adjust, like you can check various boxes and set various grouping and things like that, show different information. A good example is a sales history report. As you know, it's loaded with all kinds of options on the left-hand side that you can choose. What this allows you to do is to actually save those settings in a way that you can bring that back up at a later date. Now, you could always do that. It's just that there wasn't really a way to manage that. You couldn't really rename reports. You'd be stuck with the same reports over and over and over again. Your list would continually grow. You couldn't get rid of them, but now you can manage those completely from this area of the report admin screen. So you can go ahead and rename or delete those settings. And then the last section here is the custom area. So this is where you can create fully customized reports off of any data within the Palmate database. Yeah, so you can whatever your heart and mind thinks of, you can come up with, hey, I'd like to report on such and such. You can go ahead and create a report, call it what you want, and then as long as you know how to extract the data, you can go ahead and write that query or use a visual editor to help you write the query, which I'll get into briefly here in this discussion. So that's kind of the overview of the report admin. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And I think what I'll do is, let me see. I think I'll do a custom report because that covers just about everything. It covers the template editor. It covers the visual way of creating queries. It shows you how to manually edit a query. It shows you how to save. So I'm gonna start with that one, and I believe that's going to cover a lot of ground. So let me get going here. So the first thing to do, though, is to tell Palmate, I should say the reporting tool, to tell the reporting tool, how do I connect to the Palmate database? And the way you would do that is in here under Tools, there's Edit Report Connection String. If you go ahead and click that, there will be, on your systems, if you haven't used the tool, you would see something like this. It would be blank. So what you would do is you'd go ahead and create whatever you want for the login ID and password. However, some people's databases may already be set up by their IT company, and they give exclusive access to certain users, and they may want to be involved in this discussion to say, hey, you know what, just use this login ID and this password. But if not, you can go ahead and create whatever you want and hit this Create SQL User, and it will create that user for the exclusive rights to connect to the database. And the nice part about that is it creates a user that is read-only. So you couldn't accidentally go in and write some crazy query that literally removes data and does all kinds of stuff like that. You wouldn't want to do that. So this allows you to create that user in a safe manner. It's just a read-only access. So that's the first step that you want to do. Once that's complete, then you have access to creating full, custom reports. I already have it saved. Let me go back in there just to make sure that's, yep. So I just named it Report User, and I gave it the same password called Report User, and I hit Create. So now, to create a new user, a new report, I would go in and I would, I'm in this custom area. I can copy existing ones, rename them, things like that, delete them. But I'm going to go ahead and create a new one, and I'll call it Tag Report 2. I already have one in there because I have a script for a tag report. And as soon as I hit OK to that, it's going to create a report. And now what I need to do is go in and edit it. So now I have Tag Report 2. I go in and I hit Edit, and it's going to pull open my template editor, which is, you may be familiar with this if you looked at at editing a BOL or an invoice, because you can currently do that in Palmate. We'll give it a minute here. I have a lot of things running on this machine, but okay, so here's the template editor, and it's basically just a simple layout with a bunch of controls on the left-hand side of what you want to include in your report. I can put a label on here. I can draw a line, if I want to segregate pieces of information, things like that. So let me go ahead and just create a simple report. And let me start with a label. I'll just put this on, and I'll call that Tag Report. And then the detail section is where you actually list the details of your data. So if you're saying, hey, give me all the tags in the system, this would be where the tags exist. So what you'd want to do, let me just go ahead and put a field on here. And if I wanted to see like this particular report, I'm going to show the work center name and any production runs and any tags on it. So I'm going to have three different things on here. I'm going to go ahead and drag those on. As a matter of fact, to help understand the report, I'm going to make the header section a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and put some labels on here so it's clear. This would be the production date. This label here. I'm going to also include the work center, and then I'm going to go ahead and include the, I guess, tag. Well, let's do run number next. Oops. Run number. And then I'll put the tag. So I'll do four. I'll actually do four data fields. So here is tag number. Oops. Keep doing that. All right. So now let me just kind of make these kind of line up here. You can drag these around. Give me one more text box. There we go. So now what you do is you tell each of these fields what data you want to get. And in normal reports, non-custom reports, if you were to go over here to this data field, so over on the right-hand side, you see all these properties that I'm scrolling through. There's a data field right here, and I can pick the various pieces of data that I want to see in my report. Right now it's blank because I did not put any sort of query against the, for this particular report. So let me go ahead and do that now, because this report is a full custom report. It has no data yet. So I'm going to go ahead, and the way you do that, there's this little, on the detail section here, there's this little icon. It represents a database. But if you click on that, it will open up this query editor. And before I put in a full custom query, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can drag and drop fields, although it can be a little limiting. So I'll just kind of pause my discussion right here to segue into talking real briefly about the fact that it's important that you have at least someone in your organization that has some understanding about SQL. SQL is a standard out there. If you were to Google SQL, you'd get literally millions of hits. There's all kinds of people that understand SQL, and there's articles, and there's videos, and there's all kinds of things. So it's beneficial to have someone in your back pocket, unless you're want to you feel aggressive to dig into some videos and start getting into it yourself. But to have someone that knows SQL, because it will prove to be beneficial, because they'll be able to say, well, you want this data and this data, you would have to create what's called a join here and a where clause there. So it's very helpful to have some of that knowledge, because you may get into a report that requires that. And our experience has been, so far, I think it's almost required. It's not that you can just get by with this query designer by itself. But I'll go ahead and show you what happens when I click on the query designer. It will literally give you every single table in the database, and you can drag and drop the fields that you want to see on your report. It's just that what it does is it's obviously very visual, so it can help sort of the layman create SQL behind the scenes, and it allows you. I'm waiting for it to pop up here, but as soon as it comes up, it'll allow you to, like I said, drag and drop, but it will create the SQL for you. But again, it's needed. It's a good idea to have someone that can help you to manipulate that SQL if you don't get the results you want. So here on the left-hand side, I'm literally looking at every single table within the Palmate database. I see my customer table, my cut configuration table, my drivers table, all of that, and we named them such that it's supposed to be somewhat self-explanatory. So for instance, the customer, if I expand that, I can see every field within a customer. I got its billing contact, email, fax, things like that. And I could literally drag these fields over. If I wanted to to report on, all my customers' email, I would just drag this. And then if you look at the SQL tab, if I click over, it's creating SQL behind the scenes. So that's really handy, and I can execute it, and I can actually put that into my my report. So we have full documentation on things like, and that comes with a package. When you have the advanced reporting tool, we send you out this package of documentation, which literally shows you, for instance, customer has like things like address ID. Well, what's an address ID? Well, it will point to the address table. Or what are these entity IDs? Why do I need those? And it kind of gives you a mapping of how these tables interact with each other. But again, this is where an SQL person is helpful, because those are things that they, just by their experience, they would go into the database directly and say, oh, I see an address ID, that must point to an address table, and they would go and look at the address table, and sure enough, there's an ID field within it, and they would say to themselves, yeah, I need to join that. So that's why, again, it's helpful to have someone with SQL knowledge. But we have all that documentation available. So I'm not going to save this report, but I just wanted to show you the visual designer, that it does have some power so that you can, create reports visually. But so far, our experience has been that it's not quite enough. It'll get you, if you wanted to create a list of customers, yeah, it works great. But to get into some of the hardcore reports, it's better to directly write the SQL. So I'm going to go ahead and back out of here. That's the query designer that I just went over. And now if I had someone say, yeah, I wrote a query for you, it returns to you the data you want. It returns, in my case, I want a tag report that gives me like the production date, the work center, the things that I just showed you previously. Then once I have that query, I would go ahead and pop it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I have on my desktop, let's see, let me save this. It's on my desktop here. Custom report query. All it is just a query that I'm going to copy and paste. So let's just say this was given to you by your SQL person. You can pop into here, edit this, and then go into my SQL, paste it, and now because I have that SQL in there, if I click on one of these fields that I wanted to report on, I would go down to data field, and I would choose the particular data field that I want to report on. So I want production date on that one. I want work center there. I want run number here. And then lastly, the tag number here. And that's it. I'm going to drag this up because I don't want a bunch of white space in between each record that it returns. My report would be huge. I only want, basically a row at a time. And then I can put a footer on here. I can put other things on here as I see fit. But this is just a basic report. So I'm going to save this. And now what happens is, under my reporting area in Palmate, I see all my reports by category. And at the very bottom, if I keep scrolling down, at the very bottom you'll see custom reports. So if I go ahead and click this this new one that I just created, it went ahead and opened a report. Remember, I put tag report at the top. It gave me, well, it looks like my field isn't quite wide enough, so it word wrapped it down onto the next line. But then it gives me a work center, run numbers, and the tag number. It looks like in my data I don't have any tags, but it did give me, you know, the run number associated, you know, with this information. So I do have a basic Barney report here, and as you can see, I did that in a matter of, you know, I mean, 15, 20 minutes, and I have a full customized report. Now, granted, I copied and pasted an SQL that may have taken an SQL person maybe an hour or so to generate, but you know, there it is, and it's all done on your end rather than you know, trying to talk to us and say, hey, it'd be nice if Palmate had the following report, and we get into discussions what that looks like, and you know how that goes. So anyway, looks like I opened two of them. I opened a couple of them here. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. There is other things I can get into with the system reports and the options. One thing I will briefly say right now, on the system level reports, you can, matter of fact, I might as well just talk about this before I open it to discussion. So on the system reports, what you need to do if you want to create your own type of report, you'd go ahead and you'd if you don't have any, you'd select the system and then go ahead and copy it. And we always leave the I'll call this BOL2. We always leave the system level in there by default. And the reason we did that is just in case you got into a jam where you created some report. Let's say I called it BOL2, and you know, it, for whatever reason, the template's messed up completely. You could always go back to the system, make that your default report, and then you're back in business. So you're not like stuck where your report's not running or your BOLs aren't working or something like that. So I can create a copy of the system one, call it BOL2, make it my default report, and I can double click this, and the same thing is true like I showed earlier, where I can hop into the template and I can manipulate all of these fields. And I can also adjust the actual SQL. You see this little database button still appears even on system level reports. The difference here, though, is that you have to specify in your SQL a variable that Palmate understands. For instance, when you launch a BOL, it launches it per order. So it needs to know, well, what order are you giving me? So there's a little variable that you have to plug into your SQL, which we, again, in that documentation package, it's listed how you would specify that. So yeah, so that's it. I guess at this point, I just want to open up for any questions, concerns, feedback. Floor is open.
Not everybody at once. Maybe you could go into that report you just created, Patrick, and show how to subtotal on one of the work centers, or on the work centers.
Subtotaling.
Yeah. In the custom report that you just created.
Yep. So if we pop in here
and right-click on the detail, I think you can put your footers and headers in, right?
Yeah. So if you wanted to, the question is, well, how would I create things like a subtotal of the data? Like if I wanted to see, well, this one isn't a great one, but if I were to add like a quantity here, and I wanted to subtotal against the quantity, I could always drag a field down here as my subtotal, and then just go ahead and specify that down here. There's the grouping, and I believe, I'm not sure if we have this documented. If not, we certainly need to get this in our documentation. But how to actually create subtotal fields. Like you can have, if it's a sum, if it's an average, things like that. But once you have that field in there, you can then subtotal this whole section by a particular grouping. Like in other words, if I wanted to see the total production on on a given day or something like that with a quantity, but still see all the individual detailed records, I could look at the details along with the subtotal at the bottom. So you can do that by creating a box in the footer, and then in the detail section, you can go ahead and you can specify, how to subtotal that. So again, we'll have to get that in documentation so it's clear.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, it would be. This is Greg Ellis jumping in here. So I was successfully able to get those columns to total. Where I was struggling, and I was talking to Robert, was let's say I wanted to subtotal them by work center, and so I'm looking for totals by work center and then a grand total at the bottom. So when I was asking about subtotaling, that's what I was referring to. I was able to build that grand total in the page footer. That worked perfectly for whatever column I needed to sum a quantity. But then when I wanted to see the quantities by work center, let's say under the work center column, let's say this is a production report, for example. Instead of tag numbers, we're going to have widgets or whatever. And then under the work center, I have 5 different work centers. I wanted to see the report in its whole, but also by work center, I'd like to see a subtotal box under each work center. And then those subtotals would then inevitably equal the grand total at the bottom. So, Robert, I appreciate the question there on my behalf, but I still don't see where we can get that subtotaling yet by work center, for example.
I think you need to right-click on your group footer, probably, or your group header. Let's try that.
Well, I believe what you're referring to is like nested grouping, and the way you would do that is you would actually create a where is that? There's a way to actually insert, right here. So you can insert a group header and footer. And actually, that's the part I missed in this subtotaling discussion. I have to do that anyways to get this. Matter of fact, this isn't where this really belongs. This text box should really be in the group footer. And now I have one level deep that you're talking about, but I believe if I go ahead and do this and insert yet another group, so now I have another group, and if I go ahead and drag a text box, and this would be my work center one, I would go ahead and specify it here, and in each group header, you would actually specify your properties to what your, like this group header here, and as a matter of fact, I don't like how it names them out of the chute, but you can change the name. I can go up here and I can call this whatever I want. Matter of fact, where is that? Let me just do that. So let's just say this one was, where is that? I don't see it here. Oh, here it is. It's up here at the top. Oh, wait. I'm not finding it right away of how to, anyway, so these can be whatever names you want to call them. So group header 1, this should be group header 2, but let's say this was your work center group. I would call this work center group, and then in its properties, the data field would be your, your work center.
Okay.
So that's
I would
have to do. But
so if I had 6 work centers, and this is the way I was setting it up by inserting the group headers and footers. So, but instead of just one, if I have 5 work centers, I would insert 5 headers or 5 footers.
No, you would just do one, and then it would group it by the work center. It would basically group it by the data that comes back. So
Okay.
if you said, you would only need a group header and footer per subtotal. So if you said, I want a subtotal by work center and then by quantity, you would only need 2 group header and footers. And
Yep,
then
I see what I was doing wrong.
Yep, in each one you would specify which fields you want to group by. So one of them would be your work center and one of it would be your quantity. And based on the nesting, that's important too, because you probably want it first by work center and then by quantity, I would think.
Yep,
so,
correct.
So in that case, your inner group would be your work center, and then your outer group would be your quantity.
Yeah, so, I was trying to manipulate it just from the quantity column, thinking that it would automatically identify the work center, because that truly was the variable. Got it. I think I can make it work now.
Great.
Good.
Does anyone else have any other questions on the reporting tool? Maybe even some of the basics that I went over, or comments?
So what data are people mostly looking for? You need help finding those data fields and those tables.
Well, I think if there's no other questions, I think at this point I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. We did record this session, so you can always view it at a later time and go from there. So I guess unless there's no more questions, we'll call it a wrap.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
gentlemen.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.